I think we'll now gather together for the panel, the last part of the day. So panel members, if they would like to step up to the panel, and we're having Dr. Tim Keogh moderate.
So I'd like to formally welcome back all the presenters who have been previously introduced today formally, and as we've just been invited by Ken to do, I think what we're being asked is to engage in a dialogue with the panel about the things that have been heard, and that seemed to be a really helpful thing to do, to get us all to just reflect for a moment and let images and thoughts and feelings go through our mind about what has been evoked in us, what thoughts we've had. All in the purpose, though, I think what you're saying is how to take this forward, how something like today could sort of, as it were, be operationalised and taken forward. So happy to start just really with reflections, really, from the audience, and then perhaps we'll ask the panel to respond. Yeah. Do we have a roving mic? Is somebody able to take the mic around? Why don't you just say who you are? That'd be good.
I'm from Alice Springs, Central Arundel man. I work with Central Australian Aboriginal Congress in Gidja Mansell.
Did you want to just share your experience today later on? Okay. If you could just say your name and where you're from. Yeah.
My name is David Collis. I'm from the University of Melbourne. I run a pathway program for Indigenous students here. I guess I'm asking for a reflection upon the concept of recognition, in that when we use the concept recognition, it's often about recognising Indigenous people here in Australia. And Alexis Wright, when she was interviewed about Carpentaria, she spoke about the need to recognise what the invaders, settlers brought with them, the psychic damage, and how much they've sort of asked of the First Nations people in Australia. So I guess that's probably a bit long, but I'm curious to hear from people about the other side of recognition, in the sense of white fellas recognising what they bring to the table, which has made recognition difficult.
I might just say something in line with some of the examples that I was giving earlier today about the built environment of Alice Springs and its interaction with the natural environment, which is Arunda country. There is an example at the moment of the hill known in English as Anzac Hill, which is a sacred site to Arunda people, being really built over by an war memorial, layers upon layers of war memorialising, not one acknowledgement of what happened in Central Australia in terms of the arrival of Europeans and contact with Aboriginal people. And it's a terrible effacement of history, and I think it's a big challenge for Alice Springs to start owning that story. I think we've got a long way to go with telling that story.
Someone who was here earlier related to me, someone had mentioned this courthouse in Alice Springs, and it's a courthouse I've appeared in. Some of the hearings in the Stolen Generation were actually in that courthouse, which is a very forbidding, albeit relatively new building in the 1980s. There's people in this room that know Alice Springs a lot better than me, But I agree with your comment about the so-called Anzac Hill. Some, however, of the more recent buildings in Alice Springs, and in particular some of the more recent landscaping efforts in Alice Springs, are hugely better. That's things that have been built in the last 20 years. They're buildings that respect the landscape better, they use indigenous plants, and to me, that's a bit reflective of a much greater recognition on the part of white Australia about the land. And I don't want to in any way be self-congratulatory about this, but if you think back to 1901, I referred to this in my remarks earlier, at that point, in all seriousness, white Australia thought that Aboriginal Australia was actually going to disappear. They thought that Aboriginal people were going to die out. We don't think that anymore. We've learned about respect in very, very many ways. The Mabo decision, I know I would say this because I'm a lawyer, was an incredibly important moment because it swept away 200 years of a nonsensical doctrine. And to me, that's why this recognition, this constitutional recognition process is, it's actually, to pick up the themes of a lot of the other speakers who know much more about this than I do, psychologically important for the whole country because it's at a level of symbolism in the formal founding document. It will have meaning. In the same way that the apology had meaning, possibly an even larger meaning will be putting something in this document. So that's a bit rambly, but I think we've altered. White people should reflect on that alteration, but we do need to think about what we bring.
Look, I might add to that. Look, recognition is so important that, look, there's a cultural sort of kind of ceremony that we have that sort of kind of allows for tribes that go into other people's area. You have to meet them and welcome them in. So you've got to recognise that these are another tribe that has arrived. Sorry, it's my hearing aid. That has just arrived into our sort of kind of community, and we've got to formulate that welcome to country to recognise that they have arrived and then be told what they can do and what they can't do. Part of welcome to country. And then it's like, okay, then we're doing business together. So it's so important that to acknowledge and see that another tribe has come in or another person has come in. Alright, so that's why I think recognition is so important.
Thanks. My name's Antonia Fernand. I teach here at Melbourne University. I haven't ever met David Covers, so pleased to meet you. Just felt quite overwhelmed this morning by the richness of the presentations. Wasn't able to be here for most of the afternoon, I'm sorry. And I have a question about where this conversation can take place, because I'm very conscious of the people coming down from Alice Springs. Makes me think of the divided nation, not divided racially, although there is that too, but in terms of territories and governments, and in a way how difficult it is to have a national conversation. I just sort of felt very much as though I live in a big city in the East Coast, very different, very far away from the subject matter that has been discussed, even though over the years I think that the issues of Indigenous history and Indigenous presence in Australia has become much, much more visible on the horizons of, everyday news. And in our own university, there's, quite a lot of, at least, lip service given to these issues. There's efforts to, employ Indigenous people and so on. Nonetheless, when I think of all my hundreds of students, I think very few of them ever study anything about Indigenous Australia, whether they're, I don't know that their Australian history, and our teaching the history department actually dwells a lot on this area. My real question is, you know, how can people be involved, and especially if we've got, you know, these large, you know, this is a big, important university, why isn't this more present on our campuses? And in a way, someone like me who's willing to be engaged in the conversation, even though I work in a very different area, you know, there's not all that many places or times when such engagement can take place. So that's a very general question.
Do you have any thoughts yourself about how that could happen?
I would like to see. I guess I would like to see a little bit more crosstalk between departments, faculties, and perhaps schools and perhaps faculties at the university. This sort of whole breadth and foundational, these breadth and foundation subjects that have been embedded in the curriculum now. I think there should be more forceful encouragement of things that are in the national interest, and I just think that this issue is just so deeply in the national interest, and I'm a bit surprised that, you know, it's left so much up to sort of choice or chance.
Right. So I'm just wondering, does the panel have any thoughts? I can see you're kind of struggling. I know what you're struggling with, but you're struggling with how could you take this forward? I'm just wondering, are there anything springs to mind in the panel? It seems you're talking in some way about sort of how can we all take some kind of initiative within our own organisations, our own groups to encourage a conversation about this issue. Is that?
I guess, but since we're sitting here in Melbourne University talking about this, I'm very conscious that, you know, I wish my students were here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a question here. Oh, hang on. I think Pamela's going to say something.
I just want to say I actually think it's probably important to acknowledge that we are actually here in the here and now having a public conversation and hearing from some of the voices of Central Australia. And sometimes I think when we say how do we take it forward, sometimes it can take away from what might actually be happening now, which then can be taken forward, because I think today's been a very important one, hearing from the people from Alice Springs and from their experiences. And I would hope that it's the beginning of some more public conversations. So I just want to capture that and underline that in the here and now, I think it's happening and has been happening, and that there's probably some acknowledgement today, and that the people who have come down have made, you know, a big effort in coming down. I think we've got some terrific papers. There's been a lot of thought, a lot of very interesting discussion, even as recent as yesterday that we were having around today. And I think that it is fantastic that people are here today having this conversation and being here today to listen. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
And just further, I think there's a great reservoir of goodwill in the Australian community. That's why I referred to the Recognise movement in my remarks earlier. That's why I referred to the Marches for Reconciliation in 2000. Recognise has got more than 250,000 email addresses. That's a huge number of people just waiting for a yes campaign to take place. And with greatest respect, I don't have the problems here at the University of Melbourne. We're here at the University of Melbourne. There's people from the University of Melbourne, and I suspect most of your 50,000 students are pretty aware of this issue. There might be an issue in some parts of Australia and in border Australia and not knowing enough. But equally, I think there's a tremendous number, in their millions, of Australians that just need a little bit of national leadership for this to happen. I think we're well over halfway there.
That's inspiring. Robert has got a question.
Just following on from the point made by the lady before, DARA Foundation, which works closely with CASSE, and Julie, Annie and myself involved with DARA, know from another project at the Melbourne Centre, Victorian College's House, Melbourne University, the Melbourne Centre, where DARA funds an Indigenous program which has a lot of Indigenous kids coming from different communities all around Australia to work or to study in the arts, whether it's music, dance, drama. And we know from this project's been going close to 10 years, I think. And although it's winding down now, there's been a total change in culture in the DCA over that period of time, particularly with the current dean and the senior staff in each of the faculties there, very focused on the implementation of the Indigenous cohort in the different schools. And the Melbourne Centre, which is Indigenous unit there, led by Richard Franklin, has been a huge success. And one of the projects in the future is to, at the university, as I understand it, is to introduce breadth courses so that students doing law have to do some subject outside of law school and doing medicine, the same thing. And one of the options is this breadth course at the BCA so that students at Melbourne Uni can do that course and learn something about Aboriginal culture. But certainly when I grew up and went through school, there was no option whatsoever. I think also there's plans which I understand follows Wollongong University, where every member of the staff have to do the breadth Indigenous course or introduction. As we understand it from Melbourne University, there's also another options being closely considered. So I don't think probably you should be too hard on itself. There are some really positive things happening in the background.
So there's a further comment about the fact that even though this can sometimes feel overwhelming, the challenge of it, that there is a sort of bit of a wave of change. There are a lot of positive things happening. There's 250,000 signatures. There are programs happening, yeah.
Hello, I'm Lauren. I'm studying to be an art therapist and an artist deeply inspired by this country and the land. I was just wondering, particularly for the men's movement on country, what role do you think art in making plays and the steps towards healing and recognition?
Did you get the question okay?
Yeah. Basically, the program we're running, Making Tools, is, it's a natural tradition of the people of this land, but it's also being modified into, obviously, the manual therapy that we're doing out in the bush, and then it has a huge potential to actually explode into all different areas. We've got guys that are getting re-engaged in ceremonial dance, painting up, revisiting sites that may not have been in action for quite some time. So the program is bringing all these culturally strong things back together, but from those people they can experience their own ideas and concepts of, well, I can explore other things. Even making woodcraft, we're utilising it in manual therapy, but on stage also get the guys to think about, well, what's we talk about, where's your country, what's your dream, what's the symbolism of it. So these young people and the old people regain connections, and they're also sort of exploring all these different avenues of that explosion of culture, re-explosion of culture that is starting to be looked at as a good thing, whereas past histories it's like, well, it's a bad thing. There's been mention of Charlie's country today, and it's the disempowerment of things taken away from people and saying you can't practice that anymore. So people just want, well, okay, I'll just go into a hole and, possibly go into substance abuse or have mental illnesses or things like that, which is, which comes from disempowerment. But through this program, our young men are really starting to explore new ventures and really striving. You saw a young man out there talking about how to speak English very well. He doesn't really have that much opportunity at Bush to explore that further, but there are some small hopes for him in the future that are coming for him where he can.
There's two questions now over here. We can get the microphone over there. just while the microphone's going over, just commenting on what you were saying there, that it seemed watching the video too that in making the tool and re-engaging with culture, there's an opportunity also to put words to difficult experiences that people are having and to talk about what they're struggling with. That's part of the therapy as well, yeah?
My name is Michael Motherworth. I am the coordinator of a group which discusses the first peoples of Australia at U3A Hawthorne in Melbourne. I'm sorry that Senator Dodson is not here, but of course my questions are going to be directed to Mark Greyfuss as well as to the whole panel. I get the impression by listening to all of you that it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get a referendum passed to recognise Australia's First Peoples in the Constitution, as things are going at present. On the other hand, discussions, or shall I say, consultative meetings with Indigenous communities are still proceeding, and I would like to ask you if you can confirm whether, from your knowledge, whether it is true that not only are they not keen on a minimalist solution being proposed, but they are getting more and more keen on treaty. So my question to you, the second question to you is, if it turns out that you cannot proceed with the recognition in the Constitution through recognise, why shouldn't the Indigenous people, having already started an initiative of discussions among themselves, why should they not try an alternative approach by pushing for a treaty instead?
I know there was another question there, but we'll hold that question there because perhaps, we'll give the panel a chance to respond to that.
I heard two questions, and the first question was, is the Indigenous consultation working on it, or thinking about, or talking about treaty? And then, if the referendum process fails, should a treaty be considered? The answer to the first question, I would say, is yes. I mean, a lot of Indigenous people who've spoken to me over the last 2 years are interested in the treaty idea. But in answer to the second question, they are not mutually exclusive alternatives. And a lot of Indigenous leaders have been attempting to make this point very clear recently, that you can have recognition in the Constitution, you can have the changes that have been under discussion and move to treaty making. Because treaty making is something that will depend on local conditions, local governments, state governments. The conditions in every part of Australia are quite different. Nobody is suggesting a national treaty any longer, if they ever were. Some of you might recall the Hawke government explored this idea of Makarrata back in the 80s. It never really formed up, but it was an idea of a national treaty. The treaty making that is now being proposed is very much a local, perhaps regional level, perhaps state level in Tasmania, but it's not national and does not require constitutional change. So they're not, I hope that's an answer, Michael, they're not mutually exclusive. I'm not aiming for this referendum to fail anyway. But if it does, the push for treaties, plural, not treaty, is going to go on.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the panel about this issue? First, before we move on. Any?
I have one small thought. I think it's problematic to speak of Aboriginal as one. We've got a lot of different nations and languages and groups, and I think it's quite difficult to say that Aboriginal is, or
Okay, well, we'll go to the next question here. Thank you. If you could just say your name again, once again, thanks.
So I'm Ben, and I work as a venture therapist and run some two-way learning programs with Kenny's Mothers in Central Australia with kids from Sydney. And I'm a picture and story guy, and this is a reflection, but I guess a question. One of the images that Craig put up that actually moved me to some tears was the one of the fella pushing the rock, or he called it a ball of shit, up the hill. And Kenny spoke about this, that the solution is the white fella needs to be standing next to, working together, not telling, not leading, but pushing together. So for me, that was a powerful experience. And I've experienced that out in Central Australia, watching youth, kids, 14-year-old white fellas, black fellas together doing things. So for me, the day after tomorrow is beyond us. It's actually about informing, educating the youth for tomorrow. And how do we empower them with this message? Because my experience would be there's a lot of naivety in the past, but there's probably as much naivety in what's next. I don't know if that's a comment or a reflection of the question.
And are there any thoughts from the panel about this idea? I mean, I think one of the things you're saying is the future is with the children and education, that this is a very important thought.
I think that's a good example. I mean, I've worked on communities for a long time, and I've never worked for or above the people. I've always worked with. I think it's a really valid point that all people in this country should work with each other, not above or below. Or, like I say, I mean, that pain would be beautiful and probably a little bit better if it did have a white fella beside the hungry man pushing that rock. I think that would really see unity, which is what we are really aiming for.
Problem shared is a problem halved, yep.
Hi, I'm Lisa from CASSE. Working with children in schools now, they do acknowledge the traditional owners of the school, where the school is, which is a great initiative. But wouldn't it be fantastic if they went further and did it in the local language? I loved the way Nathan and Martin and Kenny had a discussion this morning in all the different languages, and I think that's such a practical recognition that's more than just lip service. And would be a great way to educate young children about the richness of the culture that's at our fingertips, that's not being accessed yet.
There's a question here. Oh, sorry. No, sorry, first one's there. Yeah, beg your pardon.
Thank you. My name's Diana Vivier. I was coming from a very big picture perspective, and today has just been absolutely amazing. The knowledge and what people have brought here from that region, people who have really worked with the people, they know how to work in a two-way dialogue. They are respected, and it all comes down to respect, recognition. But when I look at recognition, I don't really like that word the way it's being used politically. I like it how it's being used psychologically in an identity, our psyche, and it's recognition of at that soul level, at that level, and just everything people have said today. There's so many questions that come through my mind. What I picked up with Alexi, she spoke about the vision. How come the vision and Indigenous First Nations people, because they think in that holistic way, have the most brilliant vision, and they also have ways of knowing doing it. You just have to go to a ceremony or to a funeral or to anything. They do it perfectly. And right through the governance levels, and they accommodate cultures. They're inclusive. It's an inclusive way of working. There is goodwill, there's goodwill everywhere, but I'm afraid the political goodwill generally, it's either ignorance or there isn't goodwill. That's my opinion. So getting back to the vision, there was a huge vision, and everyone here today has spoken of that. In the 1990s, there was a huge vision coming from the organisations around Alice Springs and all the central western desert particularly, and it got killed, absolutely systematically, not accidentally, with intent, with total intent. And I'll just give you one example. At a community, I was the principal at Papania for 10 years, and we had a fantastic model of education, two-way model, right from generational, with community partnership, all the areas around were involved in it. And we got removed because we weren't going to do bilingual anymore because self-determination doesn't work, according to Mr. Heron and coming up all through the line. So then there was the selecting individuals from communities. Anyway, it was a huge divide. Since I left or was removed from Papania in 2002, there have been over 16 in that number of years, principles or acting principles. There have been about 30 methodologies of language, very poor attendance, nothing offered for secondary, and we need to get to the core of how come no one's held accountable for this. There's been people in positions for 30 years, whether it's correctional services in charge of Longdale, whether it's education, right through the territory, and it is criminal and it's had results. It's got rid of language. We never went into a classroom in that school unless there was an unknown teacher with a white fellow teacher, because that was when we worked as team teachers, and people saw themselves as co-workers. And anyone who came to workshops there, we'd ask them, what's your name, who's your family, where's your country, and what's your story? And if you did that, and I can see great potential for what people are doing now, if instead of the education department running education, they just become a servant to people like what you're talking about, Ken, and they learn and fit in with that model, because it's the delivery. And it's quite intentional, the delivery too. Anyway, probably enough said, except for the vision and the wonderful work of people, and my huge respect for Indigenous educators and their vision and legacy from Manuel and Dr. Ingu, right across Australia. They're brilliant leaders, and we have to learn from them.
Well, sounds like we could learn something from your 10 years experience too, and that was obviously a very valuable contribution that will remain regardless of what happened afterwards. There's a question here and then questions here.
Thank you. My name is Declan Ferguson. I'm an artist and playwright originally from Central Australia, of R&D heritage. I guess my question is probably most directed at Craig. I'm interested in Craig's work, having read some of your material and really enjoying your presentation today. It's a pretty deeply personal question, I suppose. As a person 2 generations removed, so having a father as an original member of the stolen generation, then growing up more or less with my mother, and then as a member of the Islander community and as a person who's from Alice Springs, when I'm in Alice Springs, I feel distinctly alienated from both white people and Indigenous people there, and I'm wondering what it means to be an Indigenous person, to identify oneself as an Indigenous person, when socially, economically, physically, culturally, linguistically, there are no signs of indigeneity to the outside world. My indigeneity exists somewhere between my ears and somewhere in my chest, and it's a very alienating and confusing world to live in, where I can choose to be an Indigenous and a non-Indigenous person as it suits me, and that seems to compound my own sense of not only alienation but a kind of internalised conflict of white guilt and guilt at partly imposed but partly unconsciously self-chosen disconnection from Indigenous heritage. So I guess I'm interested in anyone's perspective on what it would mean. This is only going to continue as blood gets thinner and thinner through generations. So I'm wondering what people think that it means to be an Indigenous person when, you know, my parents have both come from a working class background, but because of social movements and their own choices and fortunately in their life, I've grown up fairly middle class. I'm wondering, I still feel in some ways like an Indigenous person, but in so many ways I feel completely removed from that life and experience. And yeah, I guess I'm not sure how to formulate that into a question, but I guess I'm wondering from a psychoanalytic and I guess a spiritual and neurological perspective, what indigeneity means when all the social hallmarks of it have been, I guess, deliberately eroded.
Thank you very much for the question. We'll just see.
You did address that to me first, didn't you?
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask who your family is, because there's too many people here. But what I'd say is, man, you are on the way to being a poet, and we need multiple poets. By what I mean is people who can speak that story from themselves, exactly what you were talking. Alexis did that. She started to talk like this, and she wrote the novels. Man, you are on the way to being a real poet. And what you have to say causes pain for other people. It's pain for yourself, but if you don't speak it,
well, young fella, you're certainly probably Harold's young fella. Yeah? I think you're sort of kind of paving the way in regards to where a lot of young people are going to be. So,
starting to put the pain into words, yeah.
what you just I know is pretty much the journey for our young people and our children as well. Because that's where we're heading, and that's where we're pushing our kids to sort of kind of stop and learn, young man. But then we, in the Aboriginal sort of section in the communities, have to be able to sort of say, well, when you do that learning, come back to us and then we'll teach you the other side. So we've got to be open for sending our young people into the mainstream to learn all of this, but then we have to be prepared to embrace them back and recognise them back into our community, and they have a status.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just getting an acknowledgement of that, you know, that this is what we have to do as the older men, is to send you off to learn what you can, then when you come back, then we're going to be ready for you. Okay? Then through that process, we reorientate you.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out, when we talk about education, most people in Australia will learn one style of education. Indigenous children that we have in this country always have to learn two styles. They have to learn their own, but then they also have to have the English westernised functions put in place and instilled in their lives so they can function in this society of dual cultures. So, I mean, education for Indigenous people is always going to be twice as hard as the average person. I think that's something that people need to understand.
I was thinking about the experience we're all having as a group, you know, because at the last conference we had, at the end of the day, there was at the end of the conference last time, there was pain that it felt inevitably had to come out. And is that what makes recognition so difficult in a way? Because it is recognising a lot of pain. And somebody's voiced it for us again today.
We've just got to set up that process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about recognising this sort of kind of space that we're moving into, and then we want our kids to sort of kind of do the best they can as well, so they're going to really integrate themselves in the Western world, so WW kids they can understand, then we're going to bring that back. But then we as a community got to welcome that back to not isolate it. Because too many times we've isolated a lot of our people that have gone away and got education, and we sort of think, no, he's different to us. Where we've got a little bit of changing to do ourselves as an Aboriginal community.
That's a very good point, yeah. So, I'm sorry.
I just want to say that I was so pleased when you said you were coming today. I just want to say that I was so pleased when I heard that you were coming today, as I said to you before. And I would actually like to name you because I think it's important that everybody has a name. And I think that your pain is actually our pain.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was trying to say as well, yeah.
Thank you for coming. It's a hard recognition.
Thank you. I'm Ron Steelman from Sydney, a retired psychoanalyst. And I can't think of any other forum where I would be able to say what I would like to say here. I came because of the psychoanalytic aspect of this seminar today, and I'm so impressed that colleagues with psychoanalytic training have input into this enormous problem. And I've had a huge number of thoughts today, stimulated by all the papers, but I'd like to take the opportunity of acknowledging that Mark Dreyfus has given up the best part of a Saturday to be here, one out of 200 plus politicians who should be here. And Mark, what you've just been a part of, I won't say a witness to, but we've been a shared experience of what's just happened now, I think is as a result of the process of the day, that it's created an opportunity for a young man to say something of such significance and share it with us. And Pamela used the notion of radical hope, which was coined by a psychoanalyst in Canada, I think, isn't it? Jonathan Lear, yeah. And Noel Pearson has picked up this notion of radical hope. And it was born out of Lear's study of American Indians who were dispossessed and disconnected from their culture. And the entire, I think it was the Sioux Nation, or whichever American Indian nation, went into decline because they were disconnected from their culture on the ground. Now, I'm not saying everybody can be reconnected to the past and what was, but what I'd like to say to you, if I may, is there any way of approaching the parliamentarians in some appropriate setting to bring this kind of experience? You know, you've got clinicians, Craig, Pamela, and Tim, who all spoke from a breadth of psychoanalytic knowledge. And I'd like to put it in, the idea just came to me, is the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the opposite is, if you need to fix it, you need to understand it. And I think those papers contain a huge amount of professional and scientific understanding which should be made available to the decision makers to change the problem of recognition from an intellectual, philosophical, political one into a human one. You know, that recognition on an individual level is such a vital thing for personal integrity and a whole life. And I think the problems from the ground up, from the alcohol problems, the fetal alcohol syndrome problems, the domestic violence problems, they're all on individual levels, aspects of what happened to the Aboriginal nation when we arrived. And the first question was, can we acknowledge that? And I think the parliamentarians would be able, if they were prepared to listen, to get their minds around this aspect of it, that it's more psychological than philosophical. It's not a matter of conservatives objecting to putting certain words in the Constitution, but it is a matter of them understanding that if they don't do it, they are continuing a terrible trauma.
Thanks, Donald, for the comment and the question. It's a great question of modern politics, how do you get politicians to listen? And I wish I had the immediate answer. I've had the great blessing in my life of lots and lots of contact with Indigenous communities right across Australia in every state and area. Not all of my colleagues have had that blessing. One of the reasons for closing the gap statement being annual event, we've just had the 9th such statement, is to grapple with the very problem in question, how to get politicians to listen. It's worked. I know it's a slightly dismal and in its outcomes it's been slightly dismal this year. A couple of speakers have mentioned it was bad. But at least that once a year event is a huge improvement from never mentioning it. Having a regular event once a year to talk about these actual measures has been pretty useful. In the essential questions directed to the panel and the organisers of this to make sure they transmit it as best they can to members of the Australian Parliament. I'm sure they'll try to do that. And in a limited way, I can, as a member of the 226 strong group, which is the Australian Parliament, talk to my colleagues. I know I've certainly benefited from being here for the greater part of that.
Well, it also sounds like a great idea that we can try and sort of struggle with and find a way to do something like that. I'm very mindful of the time because Robert needs some time to close our proceedings, but there seems to be someone really bursting with a comment there. Could you just say it fairly briefly? Yeah.
I'm Barbara Atkinson from UCI Hawthorn, and I'm picking up from this lady and the young man who spoke. And as a white Anglo-Saxon, I'm speaking to Anglo-Saxon background people, Western people. And my thought form is this. We have been brought up in the Newtonian physics view of the world. And Newtonian physics is a one-track type of thinking. It is linear thinking. It is like when I'm speaking to you, everything is coming in one thing after the other into your ears, and you are hearing one thing after the other. The issue that I want to raise is that that is only one way of thinking. And in a sense, it has brought us all sorts of gifts and promises, but it has a restriction on it. It does not take into account pattern thinking or relationship thinking. And it is my belief that Indigenous people's way of knowing has that much broader way of understanding things from patterns, the way your eyes see things simultaneously and you get a pattern. And I think we are excluding their thinking because we think the logical rational is the only answer to everything.
Thank you very much for that. I'd also like to thank our distinguished panel, particularly the Honourable Mark Dreyfus, and please give a round of applause to the panel. I'd also like to thank all of you for your very thoughtful comments and reflections, and now invite Robert Springall to come and close the conference. Thank you.
I thought this morning was an emotional event, but after listening to the young man this afternoon, it's more emotional again. And thinking about it, if the only thing that CASSE achieved since 2009 when it began is to assist in sharing your pain, then to me it has been worth it. Running a symposium like this is, of course, dependent upon the work and effort of a lot of people, so I'd like to say a few thanks to, firstly, our speakers and panellists. We've been lucky to have such a high quality group of panellists. I want to thank those that appeared both via video link and in person, and especially those who've travelled from Alice and Sydney to be here. As Pamela mentioned, after Kieran's paper, a minute's silence would be an apt response to most of the papers. Personally, I gained insights and understandings from all of the presentations, but still I would like to review each of them again at a later date at home, as there are many lessons to be learned. In particular, I was interested in Kenny's notion of WWKISS education training as a way forward. I also found Craig's analysis of the different relationship models which exist in the Aboriginal and white communities, as represented in the paintings by Spencer and Moss, fascinating. One bound by law and the other not. It also highlighted to me how isolated and oblivious we are in Melbourne from the Neurological Centre of Australia in Alice Springs, and the different pathways open in the recognition zone, as represented by the crow and eagle. On behalf of all of us, I thank you, the panel, and the other speakers for sharing your vision and for the many insights provided, particularly in connection with the practical and psychological approaches that are presently making, or in the future will make, a real difference in the lives of Aboriginal people. I know that there's a T-shirt to be presented to each of you by the CASSE team. Secondly, I'd like to thank the Florey Institute and Cunningham Dax Foundation for allowing us to use their venue and the gallery space for this event. Next, thanks go to all of you, our audience, for your support of the symposium and the work of CASSE. We hope that the presentations have assisted and developed your understanding of the various issues and future opportunities open to Aboriginal people in Australia. I want to thank the board of CASSE, that's Pamela, Anne Cantor, Mary Traversa and Gareth Andrews, who unfortunately is overseas, and the administrative team. Perhaps they might stand. Anna, over the corner here. Liz, Linda, in the front. And Gurley Hughes, who may be outside, for all their hard work, long hours over recent months in organising the symposium. Without their effort, the symposium wouldn't have taken place. Finally, I wish to acknowledge publicly the work and contribution of both Pamela and Anne. In addition to their role on the board, Pamela, as you will have seen, is a driving force behind our work in Alice Springs and the Western Desert. Anne too shares the passion and enthusiasm for CASSE's Aboriginal projects, and more importantly, we recognise that without Anne's support, CASSE does not exist. I'm delighted, therefore, to present these bouquets, which Anna has there, in recognition of their contribution. I perhaps won't pass them over because they're all wet, I think, aren't they? Yeah, so there's a bouquet for each of Annie and Pamela. Thank you all again for coming today. Now please join us if you have time for a drink and hors d'oeuvres in the Cunningham Dax Gallery. Thank you.